After recently uploading a number of horror stories to various places around the internet, I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of supportive emails and messages I received. It spurred me on to write more, to take my ambitions seriously, and to commit an increasing amount of my time to the pursuit of becoming a published author. Little did I know that this newfound acknowledgement of my writing would lead to a series of quite horrific and abhorrent events. Over the past few months I received numerous messages and emails, very positive and enjoyable, yet every few days I would find a strange, disconnected and fragmented message sitting in my email box. Each message would consist of one random word as a subject heading, with the message itself comprised of a simple phrase, normally only 2 words long. The email address would change each time, but it was clear from the nature of the content that the author was the same. At first I dismissed them as simply the idle product of some lurker on the internet, attempting to amuse themselves with the thought of myself reading such garbled, puzzling, yet worryingly cryptic messages. As the days wore on, however, and the emails became gradually more twisted and hectic, I began to suspect that they were of far more sinister origin. I post and contribute to many websites and forums on the internet, and it is not out of place to wake up each morning to 20 or 30 emails in my inbox. I like to spend my lunch break answering them, and I genuinely do enjoy the correspondence. However, on the day after posting my latest story, I followed my usual routine of logging into my email account at noon, only to find one message which stood out most uncomfortably from the others. The subject heading was "Suffer", and the email itself contained just 2 words, "Baby cries". I sent the message to my trash folder and thought nothing more of it until that night. It had been a long day, and as I had been writing from dawn until dusk, I was tiring rapidly, feeling suitably ready for a good, long, overdue sleep. It was around 11:30 p.m. Just as I started to drift into a dream, I heard a noise. It was not out of place, nor did it cause any real concern to me, coming as it did from my neighbour's house through the wall. It was the type of common sound any resident is familiar with. I smacked myself thinking, "Baby cries," and drifted back to sleep, sure that the child's mother or father would soon be there to comfort it, as they always were. I woke again, glancing at my mobile phone, which cast an unearthly green glow around the room. Seeing that it was after 3 in the morning, I became agitated, knowing that I had a long day ahead of me. Rest does not come easy on those nights when we know we must rise early. The mere thought of the necessity of a good night's sleep before the next day's work precludes any notion of sleep itself. Lying there, I listened in the darkness to the infant next door, breaking its heart, inconsolable and distraught. Surely the parents had not let it scream for all those hours, lying there alone in the blackness of night, unattended. After trying to block out the child's cries for what seemed like hours, I admitted defeat and moved to the spare room that my families and friends normally stay in, on the rare occasions that they visit. At 7:30 a.m, my phone alarm sounded, and after fighting the reality of another day, I reluctantly left my bed, walking slowly to the kitchen to make some coffee. From the window I looked out onto the street below me, and what I saw horrified me. A police car and 2 ambulances were parked outside my neighbour's house. Even though my groggy, pre-caffeinated mind, the memory of that helpless child crying in the night sprung to the fore. Immediately I stopped what I was doing, threw on some clothes, and ran outside. I was not the only person watching, as the usual noisy neighbours stood at their doors, with some even out on the street, still wearing their dressing gowns, idly gossiping and whipping up any number of scandalous stories. Asking several onlookers what had happened, I was told a variety of accounts, from the whole family being murdered to a ghastly king killing them in the night. A hush fell over the street as my neighbour's front door opened slowly. 2 police officers exited the house somberly, as the collective gasps seeped out from the mouths of the local residents. They were carrying a stretcher, and on it a body bag containing the now deceased remains of one of my former neighbours. A few cries rang out from across the street. Those who knew them wept, while those who did not gossiped. Then another silence, followed by another stretcher and another body bag. This time no one uttered a sound. A tension spread throughout the air, a hanging sense of dread, as all of us waited, hoping beyond hope that the child was safe. Heartbreak. The last stretcher, supporting a small and almost insignificant shroud, was solemnly carried into the back of an ambulance. Tears were wept, and answers were demanded from the police, but I could not cope with the sight. The sound of that poor infant screaming through the night, screaming for its very life, rang out in my ears. The memory was deafening. How was I supposed to know? The child had cried before, as many do. I did not know. I walked, dazed, back into my garden, and into the now hollow sanctuary of my house. I'm not ashamed to say that I cried, knowing that if maybe had just paid attention, or shown more concern than simply getting to sleep, that if I had noticed something was amiss, I would have called the police, and then perhaps they would still be alive. Several hours later, 2 police officers arrived at my door to ask if I had seen or heard anything unusual from the night before. They said that they were not at liberty to tell me what had happened, but that any information I could give would help them immensely with their investigation. When I told them about the email I had received, they looked at one another with almost obvious senses of skepticism. When I showed it to them, they asked if they could have my login details as an attempt to trace where the email had come from. Of course I gave it to them, and then they left, simply saying that they would be in touch. As soon as they were gone, I returned to the computer screen to switch it off. I recoiled in horror to the sight of another cryptic email sitting in my inbox. The subject heading said, "Fan," and the email, it simply read, "You told." I was utterly unprepared for what happened next.